What's up, guys? It's Dr. Seth, and today we are going to be talking about fixing anterior shoulder pain on bench press. And for most lifters, the first place I'm going to look is whether or not they have access and control over shoulder internal rotation. If you're asking why shoulder internal rotation is important, it's easier to visualize from the side. Unless you're benching like some sort of pterodactyl, we're going to require at least a certain degree of capsular IR in order to get that bar down to our chest while actually loading into our pecs. And when we see a lifter with that pterodactyl bench, it's usually because they're running away from their lack of shoulder internal rotation, and then they're going to have a really hard time actually getting their pecs into the lift. So how are we going to tell if your shoulder internal rotation sucks? The first thing you're going to do is set your shoulder blade down and back like you are doing a bench press. We'll get to why that's important in a little bit. Step 2 is going to be putting your arm out to your side with your elbow bent. Step 3 is going to be keeping your shoulder blade pinned down and back while letting your hand drop down into shoulder IR. The reason it's important to keep the shoulder blade pinned down and back during an internal rotation test is because shoulder motion isn't just what happens at the shoulder socket, it's also what happens with the shoulder blade. If we move the shoulder blade, we're going to change the direction that the shoulder socket can point, so if we're dumping the shoulder blade forward as we're doing an IR test, it's going to look like we can get pretty far, but that's just because the shoulder blade is moving, not the shoulder socket. And if we're trying to get a picture of what's happening at the shoulder socket, it's important that we're not dumping that shoulder blade forward, because it's going to make it look like we have access to more range of motion than we really do. And during that test, if we can't access any shoulder internal rotation without dumping that shoulder blade forward, or if it feels pinchy or shitty, it's a sign that we probably should be looking at improving your ability to access and control shoulder internal rotation. And when we are talking about bench press, a lack of shoulder internal rotation is going to play out in a handful of ways. If your shoulder blades are set and your upper back is locked in, things are going to bind up before you're able to get the bar to the bottom, and it's going to feel really shitty and pinchy as you lower the bar. If your scaps are all loosey-goosey and your upper back isn't locked in, a lack of IR is going to show by you getting to the point where it does start to bind up. Then your shoulder blade is going to dump forward, you're going to dump the bar down, and it's going to feel really awkward to get the bar out of that bottom position. And if we are doing that shoulder blade dump, you're probably going to feel it in that AC joint if the scap is getting torqued further than the AC joint wants to handle, or you're going to feel it in the pec minor because the pec minor is going to be doing some of that pulling the scap forward and down. So if you are the shoulder blade dumpy bencher, you're going to have to work on a little bit of scapular control in addition to cleaning up your internal rotation, but don't worry, we are going to save that for the end of the video. Now, I do see all the sleeper stretch stuff that everyone on YouTube recommends for shoulder internal rotation, but there's 3 big problems with this. Number 1, the position is not very specific to bench. Number 2, it's doing a bad job of isolating shoulder socket motion from shoulder blade motion. And number 3, it's not very easy to get strong in this position, which is what we really need if we want it to carry over to a big bench press. So what are we looking for? Number 1 is an abducted humerus, so we're in a similar position to where we'll be on bench press. Number 2 is a way to isolate the shoulder socket from the shoulder blade. And number 3 is a way to load it. The great news is I've got a way that we can nail all 3 of those on the bench press as part of your warm-up. You're just going to need a light dumbbell. Step number 1 is pinning your shoulder blade up against the bar to prevent any scapular motion. Number 2 is putting your elbow on top of the bar. Number 3 is letting the dumbbell carry you down into an IR stretch, and then you're going to pull yourself back up into external rotation. All you're going to do is do reps here, looking to get a little bit further into internal rotation, and looking to get a good contraction on the way up. As you get better at access to this range, and as you get stronger, you can work towards using heavier and heavier dumbbells. The important thing is that we're keeping pressure on that shoulder blade so that it isn't rolling forward, and we're keeping the motion in the shoulder socket. You're also going to get a little bit of tissue work through the infra and teres here. It feels really nice, but that's not the real reason we're doing these. I'll usually get rehab clients to run 2 to 3 sets to mild fatigue as part of their bench warm-up, and it's going to work even better if you can do these even on the days that you aren't bench pressing, because more exposures means more opportunities to build tolerance to the position. As an accessory, we're going to train a wide grip press with a deliberate flare because it's going to increase the demand on shoulder internal rotation. And I know what people are going to say, isn't wide grip with a flare hard on the shoulders? And yes, it absolutely can be. So the trick here is going to be to limit the flare to what your shoulders can handle and limit weight on the bar so it doesn't feel like total dog shit. I'll get guys to start off with 2 to 3 sets of these for 15 to 20 reps, keeping things light enough that it doesn't piss off the shoulders. If you can't do full range of motion without shoulder pain, start with a 2 board or 1 board and then work your way down as your shoulders get healthier and healthier. And last but not least, we're going to look to challenge both our shoulder blades and our shoulder sockets through a big range of motion. And we're going to do that with full range push-ups. Call them full range because my hands are elevated, letting me drop into a bigger stretch. And then at the top end, I'm pushing my shoulder blades all the way through, making sure I'm getting full protraction to give myself some extra serratus work. When we're thinking about a bench press versus a push-up, the biggest difference is that on a bench press, the pad is going to help secure and stabilize your shoulder blades, whereas on a push-up, the shoulder blades are free to float around. Which means that when we're doing push-ups, there's going to be way bigger demand on our shoulder blade control, and by finishing with full protraction and then lowering ourselves to the bottom, it's going to help us get better at catching the bar with our serratus when we're running bench press. I'll usually get guys to run those for 2 to 3 sets once or twice a week, pushed fairly hard. If they're too difficult at first or your shoulders feel too sketchy, rig up a reverse band around your ribcage or elevate the hands higher and higher to make the leverages a little bit easier. And I think that should about cover it for a shoulder internal rotation starter kit. We're going to isolate, strengthen, and restore shoulder internal rotation with that pinned scap dumbbell drill. We're going to increase IR demand with some pressing with some wide gripped flared benches, and we're going to increase IR demand with extension and protraction with those full range push-ups. So guys, give those a run. Make sure that you're pushing them hard enough, often enough to see a difference, but at the same time, don't push them so hard, so often that things get worse. A general guideline is that if things aren't getting better, but they're not getting worse, you could probably afford to do more. If things aren't getting better and they are doing worse, you're probably pushing something somewhere too hard, and that might mean that you need to back off a little bit on your main bench to let the small things we're doing for the shoulder catch on up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you need more direct help, hit the links below to book an appointment, and make sure to check out the next upcoming lecture series on making conjugate powerlifting work for raw powerlifting. I said that wrong, but in the lecture series, I will be more prepared than I am for this video, so make sure to check her out. Have a good one.